Hello, this is Mara Jade, and I'm here with another video, and while perusing news sites looking for a topic to discuss, I came across this article, arguably 2 days old, but nonetheless interesting, and that is from GameSpot.com, entitled, The Last of Us Part 2 pre-orders are tracking ahead of previous record figures. The Last of Us Part 2 is poised to do very well if the game's pre-order figures are anything to go by, and I love how the author couches that last part of the subtitle, if the game's pre-order figures are anything to go by. It's very much like the box office estimation for movies on opening weekend. A lot of it stems from the pre-purchases of tickets, and those who are trying to make the predictions go off of that trend as if that trend is going to continue through opening weekend, discounting the people who wait for reviews from trusted sources, either critic or user, prior to either seeing a film or buying a game at this point in the juncture. And there's another thing in this article that kind of made me scratch my head, but I'll go into that after I read the article and give my 2 cents on the situation as it stands right now with Sony, PlayStation, and Naughty Dog. So let's dive into this, shall we? Okay. The Last of Us Part 2 is finally almost upon us, with its June 19th release date inching ever closer. The game, which has faced delays and leaking plot details, is still tracking very well according to Sony, and in fact could end up breaking sales records. According to PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan, who spoke to GameSpot's sister site CNET ahead of Sony's upcoming PlayStation 5 reveal, The Last of Us Part 2 is likely to sell big numbers. In Europe, pre-orders are tracking ahead of Marvel's Spider-Man at the same comparative point before the game's release. That's significant because that game broke records for Sony, selling 3.3 million copies within 3 days of release and earning over 1 million pre-orders. It's not clear what the split is here between physical and digital pre-orders, although digital sales are up across the board for games, especially amid the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's another head-scratcher in the article that I overlooked. While Ryan only mentioned Europe, The Last of Us Part 2 seems to do well in other regions too. I like how they say seems to do well. They don't have any definitive figures at this point. We hope this will be a defining game for this generation, he told CNET. He also said that the game will run on PlayStation 5 at launch. The limited edition Last of Us Part 2 PlayStation 4 Pro has sold out, unfortunately, but you can still pre-order the headset and controller right now. Oh well. Review copies of The Last of Us Part 2 are in some reviewers' hands. Others, who didn't get the copy, bitched about it on Twitter. Look out for a new hands-on report on GameSpot soon. Now, I find this interesting because Jim Ryan only mentioned Europe. Now, I'm not saying that Europe is necessarily a small demographic, small market necessarily, but at the same time, I'm more curious to see what the sales are going to be like here in the West, in America, essentially, because of the whole situation surrounding what Sony and Naughty Dog did when the leaks came out, and then went about their crusade against people either offering criticism on the leaks, talking about the leaks, or just talking about what Sony was doing and getting copyright strikes on their channels, including moi, pretty much. Now, the copyright strike was removed after the 10 days after I filed the counter notification, but at the same time, you had people facing 2 strikes and 1 more, and their channels could have been eliminated entirely because of what Sony and Naughty Dog were doing. Primarily Sony, because a lot of it was a third-party entity acting on Sony's behalf. And like I said, also, we're only getting Europe figures at this point, and I find it interesting that we're a little over 2 weeks out from the game release, and we don't have any clear idea other than that market. So I'm wondering, is it going to do well here? I think it's going to do well. Like I've said in other videos, I don't necessarily think it's going to bomb for a basically a comprehensive reason. One part of it being that there are people who are buying the game regardless of what's happening because they loved the first game and they're going to buy The Last of Us Part 2 no matter what. But then you have the people on the other side of the spectrum saying that they're not only not buying The Last of Us Part 2, but they're not buying any Sony products at all because of what Sony and Naughty Dog did. But then you also have the bigger chunk that's in the middle of people kind of riding that line between either buying it or not buying it, And those are the people that Sony would have to sway. And I don't think they exactly did themselves any favors when they started going on the copyright strike crusade against YouTubers. Because people are looking at this going, seeing this, and then either saying, I'm not going to buy this because of what this company is doing to the little guy, pretty much. But then there are others that are going to be looking at this going, yes, the situation is bad, but I'm curious to see what this game exactly like if Sony's doing this and people are talking about it. So they might buy it just out of curiosity alone. That's why that's why I'm very curious, even if it's a morbid curiosity at this point, to see what the figures are going to be for the sales of this game. Now, me personally, I've said this in the past, I'm not changing my mind at all. I'm not buying this game. Really. Not even a used copy at this point because of what was happening to YouTubers and other people criticizing what Sony was doing on other sites, like Twitter. Basically, people getting DMCA strikes for memes. So I'm at this point going, I'm not buying this game at all. Actually, Naughty Dog would be lucky if I bought anything they made from here on in at this point in the juncture, pretty much. But at any rate, I found that very interesting that ahead of the sales, the president only mentioned European figures, and the author tried to spin it as much of a positive light as possible, saying it seems to be doing well in other markets, and if pre-order figures are anything to go by, it's set to do well, sort of a situation. But we'll see definitively in a little over 2 weeks, so with the June 19th release. Also, like the author said, it's not clear between physical and digital pre-orders. So that would be an interesting split as well, to see how many people actually pre-order the digital copies or how many people are actually waiting for the physical copies to hit stores. But at any rate, let me know down in the comments again, are you still planning on buying this game? Are you not planning on buying this game? Did you like the first game? Did you not like the first game? Let me know down in the comments what you think of this whole situation. Whether you're for, against, or indifferent at this point, I take all comments in stride. I try to engage as much as possible, as long as you're respectful in the comments. That's all I ask. Doesn't matter your opinion. If you like this video, leave a thumbs up. Share it on social media if you will. This is Mara Jade, and I'll catch you on the dark side with my next video and or live stream. So, take care.